In this video, I'm going to be talking about the new features in the interface on this latest version of Thea Render. In the Material Lab, we can click on Options, then click on High Resolution to switch this to get a much bigger preview of what the material is going to actually look like. We can also right-click on Texture down here, or go to Window, More Settings to open up the Texture Lab. And we'll also notice in the Texture Lab, under Options here, we also have a high resolution option to get a much bigger preview of what the material will look like than we had before. Over here under General, we also have the options of Shadow Catcher and Repaintable. Repaintable is for Climo integration, so if we want to have a material so we can retexture it later in Climo, pick the texture and click Repaintable on it. We also have the option of going over here to Material, select one material or multiple materials by holding down Control. Then we can right click and make all of them repaintable or have Shadow Catcher all at the same time. We'll also notice that when we do make a material repaintable, we get a little brush showing up over here to indicate that it is repaintable. But also, if we turn on Shadow Catcher, we'll get a little umbrella to indicate that Shadow Catcher is turned on for that material. This is not a new feature, but I didn't explain it in other tutorials. There's also a section down here where we can enter notes. Next, under the browser here, we have the option to switch between tabs by clicking on the arrow here. We can also click on the tabs to switch between them. Next, let's go through some of the new options over here. Some of the new options over here are obviously the new icons that are up here. So with these new icons, we can quickly sort a scene A to Z by clicking A to Z here, and it sorts them alphabetically. We can build all the material previews, clean up unused materials in the scene by clicking Clean Up, transform an object to the ground or the origin, or deselect the object by clicking here. The other way to deselect an object would be to press the spacebar here in the viewport. These icons also make it very quick to delete an object. If we delete an object that we want to bring back, click on Undo. It also makes it very easy to duplicate an object. The duplicate will be found at the bottom of the list. So to easily bring it to where it should be alphabetically, click Sort Scene, and there it appears. So let's say we've made a duplicate we don't want. We can easily cut it or delete it. To resort this list a little bit differently, so let's say we want to move this angel down on the list, we can cut it and paste it wherever we might want it. We can also copy paste it to make multiple copies. And what's kind of cool about this is each copy gets a different number to distinguish each copy from the rest of the copies. And again, I'll quickly delete these copies by selecting them and pressing delete. A quick option here to add a model group, light group, camera. So let's say I want to add a model group. Another way to quickly group models now is to select them, then right click and go to Edit, Group. which quickly puts them in a group. The other way to group before would be to select them and click on the group icon right there. I'll undo that. Another way to get to these new right-click options is we can do it here in the viewport by going right-click, and all these options are also available here as well. Another cool thing that's been added to this interface is here under the Models tab. If we notice, now we have a quick little preview of what all the different models look like here in the Model tab. This can make it a lot easier to select certain objects. Say we want to select the tabletop underneath this tablecloth. We can't just click on it because it's underneath the tablecloth here, but using the models here, we can scroll down, see where the actual tabletop is, which I've actually not even named tabletop here, but I can still see the image and see that it is a tabletop, and quickly select it this way to retexture it or whatever I might want to do with it. Or let's say I want to select this picture, double click on it, there's the picture. So to show this actually building the previews of the different objects, I'm going to switch scenes real quick. And here in this scene, I'll go to the models port where the models previews have not been made. Now click build all previews, and it quickly builds all the previews for all the models. Another new feature of the interface here is that we can actually right-click on any of these and export it as a Thea model package file. So this is a great feature to quickly pack up any individual models and save them out so we can maybe load them up down here and easily add them to any scene later, like in the case of these plants. So say we had a ton of these plants in our scene. Up here we could right click on the plant, say export, save it, and then really quickly add it to any scene later on. We can also do this with materials, say export, save it as a material package file. And let's say I've already selected multiple models, right-clicked, and grouped them, and I want to export the whole group. I can then right-click on the group and say export, and it will export the whole group in a nice model package. So this is a really great option if we have something like a tree with a ton of leaves and branches and other things that we want to all group up in one nice model package. We can group them up like this, then go to the models view, right click, export, and export the whole tree by itself to be easily reinserted later, just like these plants. One thing that was included in the old version but I haven't shown yet is that we can actually press 0 here in the viewport, and we can get a top, right, and front view of this object. This makes it really easy to move the object exactly where we might want it in the scene. But if we should move it accidentally, press undo and it goes back to where it was. Then to make any one of these windows bigger, click on it and press 0 again to get it full screen again. Now let's go back to the other project to continue looking at the new features. Another new thing is we can right click on any material and click on select model to select the model that the material was placed on. We can also go to the materials tab, right click on the material and say select model to select the models this way as well. In this case, I've selected a ton of different lights and this rail that this material was applied to all very quickly and easily by right-clicking and clicking on Select Models. Also in the Materials view, we might notice that we also have some new icons here to build all the previews, sort them, or clean up the unused materials. Another new option here is, like in this case, we have this same material applied to two different objects here. So let's say we want to switch out this tablecloth with a different material. We can now right-click on it, go to Material, and say Make Unique. This will make it so that it separates this material from this material. They're now no longer connected because a new material has been made for this object that is separate from this object now. So we can switch out this material with something else and not have it change because it is a separate new material now. Another huge feature that's been added to the interface is all the tabs can be rearranged. So let's say we want to move the materials down here into properties. We can do that. Move it back up. We can switch around where the material lab appears over here. We can also undock a window to have it separate, or move it around and redock it over here. All these new changes can then be saved by going up here to Customize, Layouts, and saying Save Current Layout. This is a great option in case we have multiple users working on the same computer. We can then quickly switch between what one user might use and what another user might want to use. And as long as I'm here in the Customize menu, there's also a new resolutions option for the darkroom. When we go to the darkroom and we press play, we have some options here preset for different resolutions. Well, now we can actually pick different resolutions on our own. So let's say we wanted to add 720p resolution. If it wasn't here, we can just type in 1280 x 720, press OK, and it's now been added to the list right there to make it really quick and easy to select different resolutions. If we go to Properties, Current View Properties for the current camera that we're looking through, here under Resolution, it will also affect the resolutions available here as well. Over here under the Render tab, there's also display presets for the display tab in the darkroom. Here in the darkroom there are a ton of different settings. So all of these settings can be set and saved. I'll uncheck these to more noticeably see what this does. So I have a preset saved. If I check this, I reload the previously saved presets that I saved for the display tab in this darkroom. And of course we can save any presets we want. There's also this presets options for the actual render over here. So we can change this to quickly change all the presets for different rendering modes. And it doesn't only change the options right here under the general menu, it changes the options also for the biased options in these two menus. So let's say we go to Render, Presets, Direct Lighting, which is a biased preset. It's changed quite a few settings here very quickly. Another option here is Viewport, And to better see what this does, I'm going to quickly switch scenes here. Here I've done a really quick interactive render to show how detailed the floor looks. If I switch back to the model view in solid mode, the floor doesn't look quite as detailed. So to get the floor to look more detailed in this view, we can go to Customize Viewport and change the max texture resolution to something higher. And now it looks better. We can switch it even a little bit higher to get it look even better. Be careful with how high the maximum texture resolution is set, because the higher it is, the slower the viewport will become. Another option here is for instances. So I'll turn on my instances. And by looking at this, we see what we saw before, which is a bunch of boxes in place of the instances. And previously we would have had to do an interactive render to actually see what the instances actually look like. Now we can preview what they look like in the viewport by going to Customize Viewport, unchecking this box, and now we can see all the instances in the viewport without having to do an interactive render. Now if we do have a lot of instances with a lot of geometry, like in this case, it is handled extremely well with the render engine in Thea Render, and it renders extremely quickly. It actually renders so quick that it's actually quicker to do an interactive render with synchronous display on to get a quicker preview of what the scene looks like than by viewing it in the viewport. We can actually rotate it more smoothly here in the interactive viewport and get a better preview quicker than by actually seeing the instances in the model viewport with all their geometry. Now I'll switch to the other scene to continue. Another thing in the darkroom that we might notice here is that there's a new tab called History. So I'll double click here to make this window bigger so we can focus on history. In history, we now have different buffers to save renders that we've done before. This is an incredibly useful option because now with the buffers, we can click on one, hold down Control, select a different one, and do either a side-by-side comparison to compare the two, or do a different kind of compare using the slider to see the difference between different images. So in this case, I wanted to compare how the scene looked without this light right here and compare it to the scene with that light. So this is a great feature for something like that, or to preview how an image has looked after we've rendered it for longer, or by switching out a material, or when we're testing out different materials to see subtle differences and pick the one we like better. There's also an option here to add new buffer. Add new buffer is a great thing if we want to load up an old image and compare it to other images here. So in this case, I'll go to File, Open, and I'll open up this image. So it opens up. To save it in this new empty buffer slot that I've made, double click on the empty buffer slot and it's added. So we can actually see and compare it to other images if we wanted to. To delete any one of the buffers down here, right click, say delete to delete it. To reload another image, just double click on it. This toggle start end position is good to pick where the new image is going to show up. So if I say add new buffer, we notice it's added over here. But let's say I want it added over here, I can say toggle start end, and now it's added to the left over here. There's also toggle automatic addition. If this is on, it will add a new buffer for every time we press the stop button on a render. If it's off, it'll save right over the old one. We can also make the picture bigger, smaller, take away or add the text. The text is extremely useful down here for us to see how long it was rendering, how many cores it was rendering on, how many samples were taken on the image, and the rendering method used for the image. Another thing that can be done here is to double click on this little bar to get rid of it very quickly, see the whole image. We also might notice this little clock up here. This little clock appears when we're looking at some history that's not loaded into the current buffer. So right now we're looking at history right here, but let's say we want to reload this image to continue rendering it by going render resume. To use this image then, we can right click, say revert buffer. Now the clock is gone. To indicate that this is the currently loaded buffer, we can now go to render resume and continue rendering this image as long as we haven't made any changes to it. There's also a quick way to save any of these buffers by right-clicking and saying save image. So that's pretty much it for the new features of the interface in this newest revision of Thea Render. I hope you enjoy it. There's a lot of work that's been put into it, and I think it shows. If you want to learn about the other pieces of the interface here, take a look at the quick start guide for Thea Render or the viewport tools tutorial that have been made, which has a ton more information on how to use the other features of the interface. So I hope this helps out. Happy rendering.